cloud. What I don't have is the spiel in front of me. Please hold. Oh my goodness. Lauren, okay, call to order. Okay. The budget subcommittee meeting for Greenfield Public Schools being called to order at 11:40 a.m. This meeting is being held fully remotely in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts March 29, 2023 order extending certain provisions of the open meeting law, general law, chapter 30A, section 20. Per open meeting law, any member of the public may make an audio or video recording of this meeting. For information, the Greenfield Public Schools is recording this meeting and it will be forwarded to GCTV to be posted on their site with the other recorded meetings. So I will do attendance. So Chair Ekstrom. Chair Ekstrom, are you in attendance?
Yes, I had it on mute, sorry.
Okay. Member Johnson Musad is absent. He shared that. Member Martini.
I am here.
Okay. So the meeting is in session, as I said, 11:40 a.m. Okay. Are there any members of the public who would like to make comment? Okay, as I stated, we have some students, but there is no public comment. Okay. All right, so the agenda is, all right, I'm just looking back. I am trying to take minutes at the same time. So the only agenda item is updates and discussion on the FY24 budget. So Susan, do you want to open that or do you want me to just take it away?
Well, I'll open it and say I know that there's been a lot going on with my being out of town. I've missed some of it, so I appreciate the superintendent reaching out and asking us to hold a subcommittee meeting. And I hear that there have been some updates and we wanted to share that with the public as well as talk about it in front of everyone. So superintendent, if you wouldn't mind, take it away.
Okay, so and Andy Paquette is on this meeting. He does the Greenfield Public Schools Business Services. So Andy will add in as he feels fit. So I, in terms of review, brief review, publicly it was shared and I did a pretty in-depth review with the school committee of potential ways that our budget deficit could be addressed if, in fact, the mayor's current budget proposal stands. So that's approximately $1.5 million difference between the school committee's voted budget and the mayor's proposed budget. And as I have consistently shared, I will not call these recommendations because we don't recommend them, but I would be remiss in my job responsibilities to not present ways to balance the budget to the committee. So I do want to recap a few of them because I think it's important that we understand that some of these potential reductions are things that have come to fruition between the time I created my budget and the time that we had to sit and look at the budget after the mayor's number came to be. So as you folks on the committee know, I start creating my version of the budget probably at the end of November to mid-December and work with the administrators all the way until I have to present it to you, but it's done almost a year ahead of when we need to actually have the funds for that budget. So since then, we have had a retirement from one of our reading teachers at one of the elementary schools. The person retired of their own choice. But when we looked at that retirement, we looked at the needs for service in that building. We came to the agreement that we could reduce from a full-time position to a part-time position, and that it would be appropriately funded through the Title I grant, which is a recurring grant. So we get that money year after year, and are quite confident that we will be able to fund that position going forward. So we actually can reduce our budget request by $61,000. So we don't need the funds to cover that reading position anymore. The next piece is withdrawal of the 2 first grade positions that I had put in the budget to begin with. In December, when this budget was created, we believed we would have a high number of kindergarten enrolled, new students enrolling for next year's kindergarten. We already have 3 kindergartens. So if we thought we were going to have 3 kindergartens next year, we would then need 3 first grades to account for we call it a bubble of students rolling up into first grade. The kindergarten numbers are not materializing at this point. We do not have enough students enrolled, even when we compare current enrollment to enrollment at the same time last year. We're cautious because we know that sometimes parents enroll students late in kindergarten, but even if we look at end of April last year and end of April this year, the numbers are not materializing. So I have taken out the 2 new first grade positions, because if we have 3 kindergartens, we can reduce to 2 kindergartens. That extra teacher can move into the first grade. So we would have the numbers of blocks we need. So we really don't need the money that had been budgeted for those extra 2 first grade positions. Does this make sense to the committee members right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So the other thing that we looked at are, we looked at the schedules. This is the challenging part of the conversation because it begins to involve people. But we've heard consistently that the population in Greenfield is declining. Population in Greenfield schools is declining. Quite frankly, the population in all of Massachusetts is declining. As we do building the schedules and we look at students' course selections, required courses, advanced courses, the types of electives students would need, and they do their course selections, then we build the budget. Once we build the schedule, once we built the schedule at the high school this year and looked at the numbers of students who had chosen particular courses, we had some elective courses that had very, very low enrollment. In some cases, 4, 5, 8 students. So when we eliminated those sections, the numbers resulted in a decrease of 2 teaching positions at high school. Now, there are ways that we can, in the future, offer those electives. We can do things on a rolling schedule, meaning we offer them 1 year, but not the next, and then we offer them the following year. So there's sort of an odd even year sort of scenario that could happen. And we always look to offer courses based on enrollment anyway. So we can always make them available. And if students don't choose them, we don't run them. If a lot of students choose it, then we run it. So we could, by sheer numbers, look at the reductions for those 2 positions. I realize that is not palatable because they are people who work for us. So I say that because I know that that is a challenging piece of talking about staffing. We have grant money that can pay for curriculum books. We buy our CKLA materials, our Eureka Math consumables, so stuff we have to get every year. It is very reasonable to pay for that out of the grant. We can take it out of the local budget, reducing the local budget by 137,000. That is not a problem for next year. The challenge will come in the following year when we still need those materials. We'll need to remember, we need to put that money back into the local budget. But right now, it is very reasonable for us to use grant money to pay for that. So right here, there are some things that can come out of next year's budget that even we might be talking about even if we didn't have budget cuts, because they're reasonable ways to manage our money. Okay. So when we talk about the deficit and ways to close the 1.5 million, there are already some things that we can do just because our circumstance has changed between the time I built the budget and now. So before I go on.
And so
Kate,
so where does that get us to then?
honey? I don't know.
So where does that get us to when you've made those reductions? What's the difference between what we need and what we might get?
I understand the question. I wasn't doing running math.
Okay.
Hold, I can
I'm not on the camera, so I can't see what's going on. So sorry.
No, I'm not doing math. I'm just talking, but now I'm doing math. Hold. Plus 1 plus 137, 377. Plus, that's about 670,000 less that we have to cut. So now we're probably, let's say 1,900,000 to be rough-ish. That's what you wanted, right?
That is what I wanted. Thank you.
Okay. So I just want to share that because the next piece that I need to talk about is a big piece that I spoke about at Ways and Means the other night.
Christine,
Right? Yes.
I'm sorry. Before you go on, I had a question about the electives,
Yes.
the ones with the lower enrollment numbers.
Yep.
You were talking about the possibility of offering those courses on a kind of alternating schedule in order to still offer them, but basically less often. And also about the possibility of reinstating a offering in the future if there is greater enrollment from the students. And I wanted to get a grasp of how that would work exactly. Do we routinely offer courses that we don't currently have staff for and then hire for it? Or
no, let me explain. That's a really good clarifying question, Kate. Thank you. So no, what that would be is, this is an example of the way we could do it. I'm going to just use generic information to not confuse any examples with fact. So let's say class A this year, let's say basket weaving only had 4 kids that signed up this year. Well, maybe next year, maybe this year our art teachers offering, Play-Doh, and next year we choose to see if students sign up for basket weaving. We could put both on the course selection sheet and see which one gets more students to sign up, and the one that has the most students is what runs. So we can do it that way. We frequently put courses on the course selection sheet that at the end of the day we don't schedule because we didn't have enough interest.
Okay, but in order to put them out there as offerings, we have to have current staff that would be available to teach it.
Yes, and what that could mean is that it results in us not offering a course that we offered this year.
Right.
So, like I said, if we give basket weaving this year and next year we put Play-Doh and basket weaving on the course selection sheet and the most people pick Play-Doh, then we might not offer basket weaving. We just put Play-Doh in the schedule.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
So bigger picture wise, if we have fewer staff overall, it seems more difficult to offer more and varied potential electives in the future, just on an ongoing kind of basis.
Potentially. I mean, we could, I guess yes, but my counterpoint for conversation is if students are really not selecting them, then the suggestion to me is that they are not of interest. If we only have 4 students sign up for a class, then I'm not sure that that is a class that's really of interest to our students. So I don't know why we would continue to.
Well, Christine, when I went to French 5, there were only 5 kids in my class. But
I
loved it.
understand. And
Yeah.
we are able to do some things with
Yeah.
advanced courses like that. And we have some of that at our high school, we expect for next year. But we can do things like French 4 and 5, for example, can be offered in the same class period at the same time. And the teacher, because those students are performing at such an advanced level, the teacher is able to give some independent work with the other group
Right.
back and forth. So the
Yeah.
way the
Yeah.
classroom can be formatted is very different, in a situation that you're.
Yeah. Well, naturally, like the further and the higher you go into a particular interest or subject, the fewer students are going to end up in it by the time you get to those upper
Yeah.
echelons. And
And
you
we've retained our technical, like Mr. Bostrom's courses, the manufacturing courses, his offerings, because we appreciate there are a variety of students who prefer a more hands-on type of program.
right.
We've retained our advanced placement courses. So
I was glad to hear that.
yeah, we've retained those. We've retained our languages because we want to make sure that students, whether they choose to go on to a 4-year college or not, that we give them the opportunity to take the classes they would
Right.
need to get into one. So we have language offerings available for, depending what colleges need 2 to 4 years, we have that available. We have all of our PE health available. We have I believe we still have a sufficient number of electives available. We also
Right.
have VHS, so students can enroll in a virtual class as well.
Do you recall what the courses were that we're talking about
Oh,
that
boy.
had no enrollments and that would be not offered or offered less?
I'm not that you can all see me. I am looking at Mrs. Patno to see if she remembers because we looked at some of these together. Karen, do any of those come to mind?
Entrepreneurial business. I'm trying to think of a few of the other ones that were low in numbers.
Mhm.
I can do a quick search here.
All right, if you can.
Okay.
But Kate, while she's
Thank
looking,
you.
do you have any other questions?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to get a better grip on that one. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I just didn't want to have us all staring if there was another question. Okay. All right, so while she's looking, we can certainly go back. One of the biggest pieces that I shared the other night is my greatest concern is not as much the impact on fiscal year 24 as it is on the potential impact in fiscal year 25. So the year after, because next year, to create the budget that we did originally, so when the ESSER grants, when the COVID grants were first given to districts, and Karen and I were in the positions we're in now, we looked at the grant money and we hired approximately 8 staff people using that grant money. We knew they were going to be grant funded through next school year. And then our intention was to add them into the local budget if we felt the need still existed. So, we knew $600,000 worth of staff were gonna be grant funded and would need to be added back into the local budget for 25. In my
And
budget,
that was, just add to that, and we knew that when you guys were, when the budget for this year was being set up, we had talked about that in budget meetings as well.
and it would have, yes, that was clearly identified in the superintendent's FY 24 budget, that amount of grant money
Yep.
was being used. So.
Yes.
Okay, then in the creation of the superintendent's budget, because we had the accumulated effect of multiple contracts being settled, and the fact that for the Unit A contract, we are absorbing basically 3 years worth of salary increases. The increase to the general salary lines was significant. $1.1 million just for the teachers' salaries for next year. To offset such a huge increase in the salaries, we put $1 million worth of ESER into the budget to be used for staff. If we hadn't, the increase in the superintendent's budget would have been higher than the 10% that it was. Then, when I made the suggestions or options for the committee to consider about reductions, we're using just over $400,000 in grant money more than was even suggested in the superintendent's budget. So all told, it is $2 million of grant funds being used for salary. If things stay as they are currently, we already have a $2 million increase for the FY 25 budget. And that doesn't add any other programs. That doesn't even include the salary increases that would be reflected for the FY 25 based on contracts. That includes nothing other than taking the current amount and moving it into the budget for FY 25. That's about the same amount of money that we asked for this year and didn't get. I am concerned what the state of things will be in FY 25 if we continue to rely on this much grant money for FY 24. So I think it bears conversation about how we would like to address that, because I know there is community support to reinstate some of the potential reductions that have been talked about. And if, as much as we would like those to be reinstated, all of the local money, if we were to get more money from the city, all of that we use to put back in something that is on the potential reduction list is that much grant money that we're using next year that we will not have the year after. If that makes sense.
It does. And this is always the dance you have to do with using grant money. Great, we have these funds and we need to hire teachers, but if we don't have the funds later, or teachers or whomever, we can hire people. But if we can't get those funds later, then the hard decision has to be made of how do we mitigate that?
Correct.
And so maybe spell out the options, since we have students here and they're learning, spell out the options a little bit more for us, if you wouldn't mind.
I don't mind. So, I guess I'll use sort of the example that I used the other day in a meeting with staff. Let's say the $2 million represents 20 people. I kind of used it with all of the administrators. I said, let's just say that the grant money is paying for all of the administrators in the district, which is fine, because that means we get paid this year. But when that grant money runs out at the end of next school year, all of the money is then gone. So we don't have any administrators anymore because the funding is gone. If we get more money from the city, then does it make sense to take that money from the city and pay 3 administrators with that money? And then when the grant money's gone, then that means all the administrators except those 3 are gone. So we at least have 3 instead of none. Now, that's obviously we're not going to fund all of the administrators with grants because we need to have administrative positions in the district. But that's really the deal is if we get additional money from the city, if we use that money instead of grant money for next year to pay for some of our people, then that's that many fewer people who we could lose the following year. It's a rotten conversation because we want to put back all the things that we've talked about maybe taking out. But if we put all those back, then we're still going to lose $2 million worth of people in fiscal year 25. Unless something extraordinary happens. I mean, I'm not a fortune teller. That would be lovely if I was. But I'm not. So we have to recognize the potential and try to do our best to plan for it. And as distasteful as it is to talk about reductions, I feel like the committee should be real clear on what the potentials are before decisions are made. And maybe there are some things on that list that we really feel strongly that the benefit of putting them in or back in would outweigh the negative the following year. And that's, I feel like that's a conversation we need to start thinking about before we actually have to make the decision. The other piece of this is because of contracts and staffing laws, I have to give people who might not be here anymore letters that say that we have to give them. I mean, that's my legal requirement. Our ethical requirement to be decent people is if we know somebody's not going to have a job here, I think we need to make sure they know that early enough so that they can find a job somewhere else. It's like these people have to live, they have to get a paycheck. So I think once we know what the final budget number is from the city, which it's been suggested to me, it will be approximately May 18th, which would be after the next city council meeting, leaving an extra day if the budget meetings go long for city council. It's been suggested to me by the city side that that's a reasonable date for us to have sort of the number. I think we need to be prepared to sort of have these conversations and make some decisions so that we impact people. We have a respectful way to address people and give them the opportunity to find work somewhere else if the need arises. I have the classes that were looked at, that were taken out. It's creative writing, entrepreneurial business, printmaking, mixed media, and financial planning.
Oh, financial planning, that should be a requirement.
And
Sorry.
it's not,
Exactly what I was going to say, Susan.
but it's not. It's not, just like middle school Spanish is not a requirement. But we can add, like next year, all of these can be back on the course selection sheet. And if sufficient number of students choose financial planning, then we look at a different elective, maybe that we don't run next year that had less interest, and maybe we get on a cycle.
So let me ask this just sort of from a larger point of view. And Christine, I know you know this, but Andy, part of the reason that we enjoy having you is because you have a much wider perspective of what other school districts are going through, because I know that you all provide the same services for other school districts and consequently have a better idea of what's going on statewide. Is this Andy, do you see these same decisions having to be made across the state? I mean, yes, every year budgets are cut and you have to make some tough decisions. I'm just curious if the ESSER funds, having been granted, which everyone needed so badly, being used and running out, and I'm curious if other school districts are finding the same difficulties of, we have these grant funds and we've hired people that we've always needed, but now we don't have the funding for the people that we've always needed, I'll say. Do you see that going on across the state?
It varies, yes, depending on, quite honestly, stating the obvious, how the grants were written and what they were written for. But yeah, I mean, we've got some clients that are, looking over a similar cliff that we are, and others that were, I'll say, more directed at doing significant one-time purchases and not doing personnel. Although,
Okay.
they would have said the personnel is needed, but they made the decision to focus on one-time expenses. But it is, this is not, if you're asking if this is unique, it isn't unique, I guess I'd say.
Okay.
So,
Yeah,
I
that is what I
think-
was asking.
Okay, one thing to clarify is that originally, when we looked at the grants and wrote them, we had a large number of one-time projects in the grants. We had almost $1 million of technology in there, which has been cut in less than half. We have some security upgrades that are still in the grants. I do not suggest taking that out. We had other facilities. We had some funds put in the grant that would have been able to help us offset any overage in the replacement of the rooftop units here at the middle school. I still think it's possible that the project is going to go over the total between what was granted by capital and what we have in the facilities grant that was specific for those rooftop units. So that would be, either a request to capital for more funds or we do less of the project. So that's still a potential. We had the water fountains in there. Like there were a lot of non-personnel expenses built into the grants originally. And as we've been dealing with the likelihood of budget cuts, I think the other piece is, we felt like we needed some of the staff, which we did. The thinking around it is that some of the staff was added because we believed the need was directly related to returning from COVID, and that would not look like recurring need. For example, if the high school had 3 counselors prior to the pandemic and we added 2 with COVID money, the thinking would be the further away from the pandemic we get, the less social, emotional, behavioral needs students might be demonstrating, therefore the less we would need the additional counselors. And then we could look at the funding and say, do we still really have the need that requires this many counselors? Or do we look at the staffing that we had prior and decide that that meets the need at the time that we're looking at the budget again? For example, 2 of the positions funded out of ESSER were the health assistants that helped us do the COVID testing in school. Well, when we looked at the situation, COVID testing wasn't happening in school anymore. We don't need those positions anymore. So they were no longer funded. That grant money was used for something else. So it's those types of things. But again, originally the personnel that was in the grant was $600,000 worth. We felt that that was something that was not unreasonable to move into the local budget 2 years down the road. This extraordinary situation was because of the budget situation and the need that we had to address settling the contracts. Which hopefully is a one-time thing, but as Susan, you know, more than anybody, some of our regularly available funding sources for contract settlement weren't available because they had been used not that far in the past for contract settlement. You know, when we needed to use $600,000 plus to settle some of the last contracts, that money
Right,
was
when the
not
city
available.
did, right, when the city agreed that, excuse me, that they would pay for some. Oh, excuse me. And then we had to find it within our own funding.
So that, you know, that has an impact. We're kind of trying to catch up from that. And typically with school choice money, typically with circuit breaker through special education, the goal is to, if you're budgeting to use school choice, it should be the money you got last year, you use this year. So theoretically, while you're spending last year's money, you're accumulating this year's money. That's not happening for us because we didn't have the school choice because it got spent on the contract. We're spending it as the check comes in, it's going right back out in essence to pay for this year's budget. So we don't have some of those funding sources available to offset when we're finding this impact because of the salary adjustments. I do want to say there are some potential ways to address some of, you know, that could have a better impact on FY24 and then hopefully FY25. So you folks know we have a budget freeze. The primary reason we have the budget freeze is because we had unanticipated special education needs. So we had costs that came up we hadn't been able to budget for. But if the budget freeze allows us to end this fiscal year with some positive balance, then that means we can use less school choice this year than we have thought. So that allows a little bit of cushion to be in school choice. I would suggest for FY25.
How much is a little bit?
Oh, I don't know yet, Kate. We'll probably know how much could be. It could be nothing. It could be negative and we have to use more school choice than we thought. We won't need that until the books close, which are, I don't know, Andy, around when do you think we would have a good feeling for that?
Usually mid to late July.
So not anything we can bank on, you know, as we make these decisions, which is the other piece of why I say my suggestion would be that we look to use that for FY25. We also have some funds available to make the retro payments after the contract settlement. So now we were using estimates when we talked about what the retro payments would cost, but now that we have settled contracts, we are going through the math of literally saying teacher A was here in fiscal year 22, add 2% to their salary, they're owed X for FY22, cut the check, send it. We're literally going through that process. It's a time-consuming process, but when it's done, we might still have money remaining from what I put aside. Now that comes from $375,000 from the contract stabilization account on the city side. It comes from $206,000 that the city allocated or did a transfer from free cash because of our Medicaid reimbursement. And then the additional money I have that was originally allocated to the ESER 2 grant. I have taken some stuff out of that And now that money is being held to the side. It's just unallocated in the grant right now to be available to pay any of the retro payments that are needed. And so as soon as that's done, we may have the ability to pay for some things out of the grant that are not people, that would allow us to keep a little bit more school choice available. So it's, we sort of had rough math, Susan, you made me do real fast, rough math. So now we're talking maybe $900,000 rough that we need to account for. So if out of all of what I just described, I'm just going to say, maybe there's 50,000, great, then that's 50,000 less. But the committee will really need to talk about what is on that list of potential reductions that we really, really need to seriously look at putting back because of service delivery needs, compliance with the law, and anything along those lines, I guess I would say. Then I think our biggest conversation is how to deal with the potential of 25. That is my thought for you, but ultimately it's up to the committee.
Right.
Andy, am I missing something that you want to add or change?
Nope, all good by me. I mean, as good as can be expected.
The explanation is good.
Correct, yes.
Okay,
No ray of sunshine then is what we're saying.
correct. So I don't know if either of you has
Well-
questions, if you want me to do any other kind of research, if you want, like, what you want to do with anything right now.
Well, none of this is fun. So to mitigate 25 being a huge cliff and making it a, hill that we fall off of instead of a cliff,
Yeah,
it would be letting go of some people as opposed to being forced to let go later of a bunch of people. So let's say the equivalent being, 5 people. So at the end of this fiscal year, we'd have to let go 5 people. However, this coming fiscal year, if we have this coming fiscal year, we let go of 3 people, then we would only have to, or would be easier to find funding for 2 people as opposed to 5. Am I making sense?
yeah, the more
that-
we do now, the less we have to do later kind of thinking.
Right.
And again, I'm not
But what's
trying to just, I'm seeing into the future 2 years, but
Absolutely. I'm just trying to clarify.
yeah.
And so, so the city does come to us with some funding, I guess, of that list of things that were highlighted as possibilities that could go away. I think I can, and I suspect that Kate will agree with me, the 504 coordinator would be my first choice to be returned. Because that is something we've needed for a long time. And anything that would serve our students. I'm a big believer in administrators. I know that a good administrator can make a world of difference for people who are doing the actual jobs of things. So that would be my choice for saying things out loud. Kate, do you have any thoughts?
Well, you and I are usually on a very similar page, but when it comes to students with disabilities, so that, yes, the 504 coordinator needs to happen because we have all these students who, have disabilities that, for which they do not necessarily qualify for special education, but they still need accommodation. And when there's no 504 coordinator, all of that just sort of gets laid on the shoulders of a very overburdened building administrator, and they, or someone else. And oftentimes, when it comes to budgets, disabled kids get even more shorter shrift than kids in general who have little voice, in politics and these decisions that get made, which I'm completely not okay with. So I know it's a new position, and some folks might just choose not to fill a new position rather than cut elsewhere, but this needs to happen. So, I'm with you on that for sure. That would, to my mind, be the first thing to come back, along with the ETL position that would potentially be reduced to a part-time position at AEL for the same reason, or not the same, but a similar reason, because the boringest aspect of special education is the coordinating.
Paperwork. Yeah,
God
paperwork.
bless our
Yeah.
ETL. Yeah.
Um,
But
Just so you know, for point of, for your own mental math, based on what we had included for those two positions in the tentative, in the school committee budget, that would be about $135,000
okay.
ish.
Right.
I will
And that's
say,
also,
go ahead.
I think it would be wise to prioritize having adequate administrative capacity in special education first and foremost, because when the district does not keep up with its obligations to timelines, to the very complicated laws and regulations in special education, the district is just sort of open to risk. If we're not providing a FAPE to a student, then that student has they and their family have a good leg to stand on in requesting out of district placement and compensatory services and all those things. So if we can do we can prioritize having a really good, robust capacity for managing special education and not just the services themselves, then I think that reduces the long-term kind of financial burden on the district from making up for it later.
I think talking about procedural issue is unfortunately, it's a very significant reality for us right now. So it's not
Well,
like
the other piece is though, the other piece is when there's a kid who has needs, the younger that you get them and get them the services they need, the less service heavy they are later on down the line.
Yeah, exactly why it's such a wrench to reduce it at AEL. Yeah.
I think that's
it's playing the long game for funding, because if you've mitigated things happening when they're in grade school, when they get to high school, they already have the abilities and knowledge put in place on how to sort of, I don't want to say manage themselves, but I'm not certain what other term I would use right now.
Yeah.
So
I think you're clear though what you're trying to.
Thank you.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I just think this is from an administrative position. I think having some guidance from the subcommittee and then from the committee around how Karen and Andy and I can sit and sort of look at the big picture in terms of the budget to say, if this, then that, if this, then that. I mean, and truth be told, Amy made the point the other night at Ways and Means that at the end of the day, the list of potential reductions was, those were things for the committee to consider. If you folks all of a sudden said, we're not agreeable to any of those, you could direct me to go find a whole other list. So quite frankly, if the committee chooses, you know, we can add back the cost of these two positions into the budget, and then we'd have to potentially consider other different reductions. I'm not I'm not, I'm not advocating for any of them, but I sort of illustrate that point because I know it's been talked about sort of publicly with the belief that the list I shared with the committee was a done deal. And that's not the case.
Well, I would love to say, go find a whole bunch of other things that aren't important.
Yeah, well,
you know, but
uh,
because the reduction in music is really
Yeah.
it's not just unpalatable for me, it's heartbreaking. You know,
Mhm.
we already don't have we've already in the past had cuts again and again in music programming in Greenfield, and the music program I feel is just sort of like hobbling along on its last leg, and cutting middle school cutting fourth grade band was already just
Yeah.
before the budget request was even made,
Mhm.
was really a blow for me. And then cutting strings for kids is just like really heartrending, because that's a program that extends opportunities to a lot of kids who just never otherwise would have that opportunity.
And
We have a lot of
Kate, if I-
one of the poorest areas in the state, and we have a lot of families who can't afford to pay for stuff like private music lessons and buy instruments and things like that. So and then when we are done cutting out all this programming at the elementary level and middle school level, then we don't have kids who are there to fill a high school music program, and then guess what happens, so
I know. And
that's
I
very
will say, Kate, above and beyond even families that don't have the ability outside of Strings for Kids to pay for those types of lessons, I would even argue our fourth grade band provides access for students who wouldn't even be able, for a variety of other reasons, to access Strings for Kids.
Mhm.
For some students, the only opportunity is going to be within the hours of the school day.
Absolutely.
So, I think all of a case can be made for almost everything to be refunded, which is why I had a 10% budget increase presented to the school committee.
Yeah. Yeah.
So-
I'm also worried about the long-term trajectory of cuts that may, I sort of feel like there's no choice about it that may end up being made. Especially in regards to music and our lone intrepid middle school Spanish teacher. Because we have had some criticism, I guess, or I perceive it that way, from our mayor about declining enrollment in Greenfield schools, and this aspect really concerns me. Not that I think that our current offerings, for example, in either one of those programs, in music or foreign language instruction, are adequate, really. I mean, students get a 6-week rotation of unified arts, which currently includes Spanish in middle school, but really, ideally, a student would have access throughout a whole year of foreign language instruction if they're actually going to learn it. And families have options of language immersion programs from kindergarten within a very reasonable distance from here, and we're going to not offer any foreign language instruction until high school. That seems very unattractive for new families, new students coming to Greenfield, and likewise with music as well, for similar reasons, and athletics. If we're cutting middle school athletics and extracurriculars are going, and all of this it's just sort of, to me, screams, don't enroll your kids here. So we are, in a broader environment where school choice and charters and tech schools and all of this make for a rough, competitive kind of environment. So I'm worried about the longer term impact and just that kind of snowballing negative effect over time of all this. Not that I expect you to have the answer, Christine, because it's like, this is the money that the city has to decide to appropriate to the school department, but that's where my mind is at. And I don't think I'm too far away from probably most of the rest of the school committee on that.
No, you are not too far away. And the irony of seeing the mayor or reading the mayor's quote of rationale of not wanting to spend down city money because it's not wise to do so. So it's okay for the schools to do it. I don't know. I've got a number of problems with that. So yes, I think that everyone on the school committee is on the same page with you on that one, Kate.
So I wanted to ask a question. I guess this is kind of a good segue about the sort of moving picture going on with the city budget. So I think that a lot of our city councilors are very open to trying to help with this situation, and I was pleasantly surprised to see a fair bit of action from city council in terms of voting down other expenditures from free cash and capital at the last city council meeting, in the hopes that the mayor would take that money and bring it back with financial orders to reallocate it to the school department. And I, of course, that's kind of a complicated question because, like I said, a good part of that was out of capital and not the rest of the budget. But I wanted to know from you, like, how does this at this stage impact us? And also, I'm not caught up on what was discussed and what occurred at the Ways and Means Subcommittee meeting this week. I'm only about 45 minutes of the way through that recording right now.
So in terms of, from my perspective, at this point, the conversation between Ways and Means and the mayor doesn't impact us at all because no change has been made. Susan or Andy, you know, but I'm not making any budgetary changes based on anything I've heard to this point, because as far as I'm aware, it is still discussion between the council and the mayor.
Right. So in the past, we've been through this before, at least since I've been on school committee, this has happened in the past. The city council went through budget, this might have been my first year I was on, went through the mayor's budget and found funds here and there and said, we want this to go to the schools. And the mayor at the time said, okay. And I can't remember if all of it got granted to the schools or not, but a fair chunk of the money that they found. Because it's at the mayor's discretion. The city council can't, they can reduce a budget and cut things here and there, but the mayor is the person who does the actual reallocating. So, I think the city council found something like $700,000 or something. I don't know. I'm recently that the mayor,
Yeah.
the mayor does not have to take city council's recommendation.
Right.
So
I was going to ask you to like
if
put that in a nutshell for the students who are listening.
yeah, no, the mayor doesn't have to take the recommendation. Now, the flip side of that being, and what's interesting, and as much as I hate politics, this is an election year. And I know that the mayor is running for re-election. So if the mayor wants to be on a better standing with all of the people that have reached out to the city council and said, you have to do this, then it would be a wise decision to reallocate those funds to the school district. But what do I know? That's if politically, that's how a wise person would play it out. But
in
that's what it
terms
is.
of the actual school budget today, no impact at this point.
Absolutely. Until you know, the fat lady sings. Can I say that anymore? I don't know.
No.
Until it all happens. Sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't say that. Until it lands on Christine's desk, we don't have it.
Right. So it's I imagine that I am not a city councilor, but I imagine that it's a kind of a frustrating position to be in, because the city council can say, no, mayor, we're not going to go vote in favor of spending this money on this and this money on that. But the mayor still has to come back and say, okay, I respect that you decided not to fund those, particular things, and that you would like to have those funds be reallocated to the school department, but I'm not going to. Like, that can happen. So.
And it does.
Yeah.
And
yeah. So I just wanted to know.
Yeah.
I wanted to know if there was any like new information as far as the mayor indicating any agreement to allocate those funds that were identified by the city council, and that they did not support her on to the school department. But it sounds like no, there's no information about that at this point.
I haven't heard anything.
Okay. So there is, I believe there are 2 more upcoming Ways and Means subcommittee meetings. And then there will be discussion at the next city council meeting about the operating budget, which would include discussion about funds for and how they are allocated to departments, as opposed to just the capital budget and free cash that were discussed at the last meeting. Is that fair to say?
Say that again.
I'm
sorry.
So, I mean, my observation of it is that the most recent city council meeting included discussion of expenditures out of free cash and from capital, and that the next city council meeting will address the operating budget. Is that?
I don't know that. I haven't attended in that level of detail to the last agendas that came out.
I think that is what the members of the city council were saying at the most recent meeting, because a lot of people showed up to make public comment in support of funding the school department budget, and they had some very nice signs and insightful comments. But the council was certainly open to that, but careful to say we're not actually talking about the operating budget today. That's at the next meeting. And in the intervening time, there already was one, and there are 2 more subcommittee meetings of the Ways and Means subcommittee that will be taking place. So, and I noticed, as far as I did get through the first of those Ways and Means meetings from this week, was that a number of people also showed up to that to make public comment, all of them in support of finding more money for the school department. So I hope that this lovely swell of public support and involvement will continue, because I feel like a lot of the time people are very tuned out of local politics and just don't. So they're totally disconnected. So and sometimes people will show up about a issue that's kind of niche for them, and that's fine. But I'm always sort of wishing for more public involvement about bigger issues like this. So that's been really nice to see. Christine, I think I said before, Greenfield cares about education.
They do.
at
The
schools, and I
citizens
think
care. Yes.
I'm glad I wasn't wrong. People have been showing up. So
I would like to just, I guess, have a slight caution around the advocacy around supporting the schools is incredible. But I think that's why I continue to make the point about we really have to look at 25 because of bigger picture than the immediacy of next school year. And also make the point that the school committee needs to decide what, if anything, that is on the list of potential reductions gets reinstated. I fear that the belief would be if there is advocacy around a particular item that was on that list and a budgetary change is made, that equates to that program or that item being back in the FY24 budget. Like if we're talking about instructional materials and people were out advocating for the return of instructional materials and the city gives the schools more money, then that is automatically associated with more materials being in the budget. And that may or may not be the outcome. I guess that is what I'd like to just reiterate.
well, I'm pretty sure I'm the only person who would jump up and down about instructional materials.
Well, I know, Kate, I was using an example.
And I will be
non-emotional.
jumping up and down about that. Yeah.
Not a non-emotional example, I guess I was trying to say, is we've seen a lot of advocacy, which is amazing.
Yeah. I think a
But
great deal of it has been centered on Strings for Kids, but
Well, I guess my
Yeah.
point being that, I just want to be cautious that the belief is not that it's a one-to-one correlation, that if we get $26,000 extra from the city, that automatically means that is the item that is, if anything, that is put back into the FY24 budget. And I'm not sure
Right.
that the process of school budget is, it's a complicated and oftentimes exceptionally boring topic. So I just want to share that because there are a lot of things on the list of potential reductions that elicit an emotional reaction from people because they're important to their kids. And that's what parents should do. And that's what gets kids to come to school. I know that, but
that's not what budgets are about. Budgets are about ensuring long-term stability and stewardship. And if your house is on fire, you get some water and some fire extinguishers. You don't worry about the stove. So
I just want to share that, but the advocacy from the community is amazing to see around funding.
Right.
Andy and I did have a brief meeting. The mayor mentioned it at Ways and Means. We had a brief meeting yesterday with the mayor and Diana, the finance director, where, the mayor did again reiterate her concerns about taking too much funding out of stabilization, taking too much money out of free cash for long-term impact on the city side. but she let us know she has some thoughts that she's going to share with city council. So I think there will be some discussion likely, I believe, at the next Ways and Means meeting where the mayor is talking about giving some additional funds to the schools, but right now that's a discussion to me between the mayor and city council at this juncture. But I think she wanted to, assure Andy and I that her hope is to be able to give some money back, and that she's, she recognizes the importance of education. So I expect there will be some discussion about funds. But she did say at Ways and Means it would not be $1.5 million.
I just don't understand the short-term thinking of, we don't want to use this money.
I can't speak to that. I'm just sharing the comment.
I don't understand the rationale, and to me it speaks to someone who doesn't understand budgeting and long-term growth and things like that. It's so short-sighted. And that's just me, Susan Ekstrom, saying it out loud.
I think it was that was a generous way to describe the situation, Christine, and I'm not sure that I perceive the same.
Okay,
care
I
about
think the
education
philosophical
that particular office, because the situation is that what's really needed is a larger, longer term commitment from the city side to make up for past wrongdoing, basically, that have shortchanged the school department, and make our schools more competitive in the future. Because we have all this money that has been lost previously by the failure to appropriate Medicaid funds to the school district year after year after year, to the tune of well over $1 million, and the lack of health insurance reconciliation, that all this boring stuff that just results in long-term chronic underfunding of the school department. And then we have this situation where we have a really hard time attracting and retaining teachers, not because they don't care about our school district, but because they have to do right by their own families. And as far as we lost way too many staff last year, and it wasn't like it was a new thing, because the year before that, I feel like we had the dubious distinction of being covered on Mass Live for being pretty close to the top of the list for teacher attrition across Massachusetts. And if you look at average teacher salary among reporting districts on the DESE website right now, Greenfield is eighth from the bottom of that list. So people aren't wrong when they write to the newspaper and say, look, a teacher can do several $1,000s better in the next town over, and why wouldn't they? So if we can't get commitment from the city side to appropriately fund a reasonable increase, it's not even the increase we really actually need in these newly settled contracts, then how are we ever going to arrive at a state where we're really competitive? I don't know. It has to be a commitment, not just this year, but next year and the year after that. And that's kind of goes back to what I was saying about the need for sustained involvement from the public in this, because when you don't pay attention, then that's when bad things happen. And it's hard to get that because people are busy, but that's just my general plea to the public who are not here in this meeting.
Yep, exactly.
Involved.
All right, so we have gone about a half hour over our allocated time. Christine, have we hit all the high notes or low notes? And is there more to impart on us right now? Or
No, and actually, I was gonna ask if you thought we had covered the topic because, unfortunately, I think we all have a variety of things scheduled for today. And I hope our students who are on, got lunch. So,
yeah.
I think at this point, we're probably good, and until there's a final decision from the city.
Okay.
Well,
I think
thank
the
you.
kind of consensus coming out of this meeting is not really different from before. I think the priority in terms of restoring anything that is able to be restored from potential cuts, it needs to focus on disability services, and then I feel like the jury is out still on the rest of it.
All
Okay.
right.
So we'll
Can I
we'll
get a
keep
motion to
monitoring. Yeah, go ahead.
adjourn?
Oh, sorry, you cut
Kate,
out.
you
Susan.
have to
Did
do
you
that
ask for a
one.
motion to adjourn? So moved.
Kate wants to hang out. Sorry. I'll second it and say that we are adjourned.
Okay, thank you very much. And the recording, I'm going to stop the recording now, and then as soon as it's processed in the cloud, it will be sent to GCTV.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you.